Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our new online service, something that is really new to all of us, myself included. But these are times that call us to this. So I hope you've been able to gather together with somebody, whether it's just in your family or maybe a few other families and friends coming together. As I said in our intro video, being the church means to gather. And we hope that you're able to gather together with somebody as long as it's safe and you are comfortable with that. But we do like to get together to be a people who are hearing God's voice and responding to Him and responding to His leading as well. So I trust that's where you are. If not, it's still great that you're able to watch. We're in a new reality, obviously. Today is a time when there's been a lot of disruption, a lot of separation, a lot of anxiety and fear and panic. And so today I just wanted to talk a little bit about how to respond to that. How do we go through this time of anxiety? And what are we looking for in terms of certainty and assurance? A verse that kind of comes to mind during a time like this is Proverbs 12:25. There it says, "Anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down, but a good word makes him glad." We probably live in a culture in a time that has been the most anxious and stressed than any other culture in history. And with something like COVID-19 coming, it's just adding on more. And so today is a time when so many feel weighed down and the uncertainties of the future are becoming really great to bear. And so today what I want to do is speak a good word. And really, I have no good words in and of myself. We believe that God has spoken and the Bible is His word. And when we come to it, it speaks so much truth. And it's in that He really does bring a sense of peace and joy, and as Proverbs says, gladness. And so this morning we want to come to that word and rediscover again the promises of God that we can claim. And another thing is, as I've processed this time and us having to maybe gather together in small groups like we are today, God is really opening up some interesting things. I think God's really at work in this. One, I think He's really exposing the priorities that we have, the kinds of things that we've been investing our lives into, what kind of purposes we're pursuing. And really, with all the chaos of going on and things falling apart, it's really revealing to us maybe that some of our energies and focuses and investments have been in the wrong kind of things. So that's really a great opportunity for us. Another thing is that just seeing God at work. We're connecting with people in new ways, building new friendships, being able to speak about things that really matter when in the past, we can just kind of get by with, "Hey, how you doing?" And so I really I'm starting to see how God is really at work here. And I trust that you see that as well. If you have your Bibles, turn to John chapter 14. We're going to look at a verse that I think we've looked at before, or certainly within a passage that we've looked at before. And it's going to be a verse that you're probably familiar with. But let me give you the context of what's happening here. In John 14, Jesus is sitting around with His disciples. And in chapter 13, verse 31, same conversation, Jesus says to them that, He's about to leave. He's going to a place that they can't follow and they can't go with Him. Now think about that for a second. Here's a bunch of guys that gave up everything to follow this guy, Jesus. They saw Him, teach incredible things. They saw Him do miracles. They saw Him argue and go at war with the religious leaders. They saw Him speak against the political establishment. He was a rebel on so many fronts, and he just captivated them. And they basically have given their lives to Him and their futures as well. And so now, Jesus says to them that I'm leaving you, and where I'm going, you can't come. I mean, talk about a crisis. Talk about a disruption to their plans and their lives. Talk about confusion of, this movement that we've invested in, and this is how it's going to play out. Imagine the anxiety Imagine this normal that has been completely upended, kind of like the day that we live in today. And so in the midst of this confusion, well, where are you going? Why can't we go there with you? And all of that, Jesus makes a very powerful statement. And it's in John 14, verse 27. And he says there, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. I do not give you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." Here we see Jesus contrasting two different kinds of peace that we can be invested into. The first one is the peace that the world gives. And today we're seeing this absence of peace. And again, I think it's exposing the kinds of things that we've often invested in, hoping to find security and stability. Some of the obvious ones are things like finances. I mean, if you're invested in any way, just the global collapse of our financial system and markets, the billions, trillions of dollars that's being lost every day because of global uncertainty, the economic hit that we're experiencing as well. No concept of where our economy is going to go from here, and probably the looming recession that's coming. That has created a great deal of anxiety. We invest so much peace in our job security, the knowledge that I could get up tomorrow and go to work and make money and meet all of our financial needs. And just the idea that maybe I won't have a job to go to tomorrow has created a great deal of anxiety. Our health and safety. We kind of just assume that tomorrow I'm going to wake up and be healthy and I'm going to be safe. That becomes a normal part of our life. And when that becomes threatened, we get really anxious. And look how the behavior is the kind of behavior we're experiencing today because of a deep sense of threat when it comes to our health. You think about our open borders. The ability to jump on a plane or drive across a border and see new places and be able to get back home again. There's a great deal sense of peace to that. And we also believe that those borders also protect us from external threats. Today is a day when all of that's been reversed. Our border's been closed to be able to travel somewhere, and there's a bit of a sense of being kind of captive here. And those who are elsewhere are trying to get back home. And interestingly enough, too, these borders are now open and porous to a threat that we can't see. When you think of our infrastructures, we have a healthcare system that's supposed to kind of give us a sense of peace and security. And of course, the greatest threat right now is so many people getting sick at once and overwhelming our healthcare system. We find peace in that ability to be cared for. We find peace in the ability to go to school and be educated. We find peace in the ability to, trust our governments and rely on the bailouts and the support systems that they have put into place. These are all things that we've put peace into. When you think about it, we actually feel peace in normalcy. There's a sense of peace that comes with knowing that I'm going to get up and I can go to work, or I can get up and get ready and go to school, or I can, engage in an activity like sports or a club or some kind of hobby. There's a normalcy to getting up and going to a restaurant or going and having coffee with somebody or going shopping and picking up something that I need and it would actually be on the store shelf. There's a security and the ability to go visit somebody in an old folks home, maybe a parent or a grandparent. Just this has been normal life, and now normal is no longer normal. And in that, there's a great deal of insecurity. Last week I said in our service that there may be a day where we can no longer gather together as a church. I don't think we're under political persecution yet, but it's interesting that we can't gather now. And I asked the question at that time, I said, would we still stand together? Today is a bit of a test of that. Are we standing together? Are we meeting together and truly being the church? These are all things that the world has offered us and things that we have found peace in. As Jesus says, peace as the world gives. John's readers, the people who read this about 30 years after the event themselves, were a part of the Roman world. And the Roman world, before this time, about 13 BC, resurrected an altar called the Altar of Peace. It was built in honor of Caesar Augustus, who had returned after a long military campaign in Spain and Gaul. And he wanted to usher in an era of peace. And so this altar was built, and they dedicated it to the goddess of peace. If you can see on the walls there's great carvings of things like hanging fruit and flowers, mythical creatures that were nursing or making sacrifices. We see images of the imperial family on this great procession. And we can see priests and magistrates giving a sense of political and religious stability. All these things on this altar really symbolize fruitfulness, abundance, a sense of harmony and fertility, power and prosperity. Rome wanted to be ushered into a golden age, and it was defined as this Pax Romana, or Roman peace. Well, within 75 years, this time of peace, this golden age, really started to collapse. It didn't last. It was peace as the world gives. And Jesus here is making a point that he gives something different. He offers us something different. So peace as Jesus gives is what we want to look at now. Again, the Roman mind, the Greco-Roman mind, was peace as stopping or ceasing hostilities or violence. But in the Jewish mind, it was something else. It was to reach a state of completeness, a state of blessing, a state of fullness. The word literally is shalom. It's this idea of being complete. And so verse 27, Jesus says, "Peace I leave you." But then he goes on right away and he clarifies what kind of peace. It's just not the absence of violence or the absence of struggle. He says it's my peace, my fulfillment, my completeness, and I'm giving it to you. So here Jesus is saying salvation. He's talking about, the war that has gone on between myself and God, the rebellion in my heart, and my hatred towards anything that is good because of the sin in my life. Jesus has reconciled through him. So when I'm saved, I've been reconciled with God. I've been at peace. I am now at peace with God. And this God is the ruler of the world. He's the one who's ever present. He's the one that's powerful and over all things. And he's one whose plans will never be thwarted. And I get to be in a reconciled relationship with him. Jesus says, peace, my peace, I give to you. As we kind of come into spring, it's one of my most exciting times of the year because I just love spending time outside. And one of my favorite hobbies is to spend time on the lake. Now, I just love being in the water, being on a boat. I love water skiing and things like that. But another activity I love doing is sailing. Don't get to do it too often, but every once in a while I'll take a little boat out like this. And, you only go sailing when it's windy, and I kind of even like it when the waves are really rough. But there's a significant part of a boat that makes it possible. And it's a part that you can't always see. Running down the middle of the boat is something like a centerboard, or a dagger board is called, or on a larger ship it's called a keel. And when you have that in place, the boat is stable. It can maintain a sense of direction. It can resist all the forces that are trying to push it off course. And on a smaller boat like this, when you're starting out off the shore, you have to have that centerboard up high. And what's really tricky is if there's a strong wind, it starts to push you sideways. And it's not until you push that centerboard or dagger board all the way down that you actually have a sense of stability. And I think Jesus is saying here that his salvation, the peace that he gives, it's like that dagger board. It's not being absent of the waves and and staying off the water, it's as you go in, you have this incredibly stabilizing thing that keeps you on the right path. So God's not really wanting to remove us from all the challenges and trials, including the day of today. But he's trying to assure us that he's going to walk with us and get us through. This morning I presided over the graveside service of Emma Shiel. And as many of you know, she was one who really understood this. For actually many years visiting with her, she'd always talk about wanting to go home. And she just knew the salvation that was yet to come. But the promise of that gave her such peace and strength and stability in this life. If you know her story, she has experienced unbelievable challenges and trials in her life. Yet she has remained faithful and a woman of great peace and faith. And so what a great example for us to follow. Someone who knew the peace that Jesus brought in the midst of the storm. And so today, I want to proclaim, as I have a few times already through email and last Sunday, is that our King is still on the throne. But I've had to think about that phrase a little bit, because if we look back through human history, many followers of Jesus have experienced incredible challenges. We say, the King is on the throne, and somehow that means I'm going to still have my house, or my investments are going to be okay, or my pantry's going to be full of food, or, I'm always going to be healthy. And, that's just not the case. We may experience great trials moving forward as finances collapse, as health deteriorates, or our culture struggles. But what we can be sure of is that we are in right relationship with the God of the universe. And he promises to keep us full and complete, for us to experience peace and assurance as we go through these times. So again, Jesus brings some contrast here. Peace as the world gives, it eventually brings us to a place of emptiness and absence and void. Yet, what Jesus offers us is fullness, completeness, something that truly overflows the top, and it's salvation in God's presence. The world gives a peace that ultimately leads us to fear, to insecurity. But the peace that Jesus brings us to a place of certainty, of security, and an assurance, confidence. Peace is really enduring, making it all the way through, successful endurance through times of crisis and trial. And so then he leads us to this last phrase, in light of what he offers us. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. So many times through the Gospels, Jesus says, don't be afraid, because I am with you. And so as we kind of close here, I just want to challenge you to spend some time as a small group, as a family, or whoever's there with you, to think through what are some areas that I've been investing my life in. What are maybe some areas of false peace that I have built my life on? And in this time, I'm really starting to realize that those are things of the world and are just really not delivering. And maybe in what ways is God calling me to redirect and to focus and invest my life in a new direction, in a source of peace that will never go away? So take some time to think through that. If you have any questions or want somebody to talk to, please email us here at the church, or give us a call, fire us a text, talk with somebody in your group who maybe is farther along in the journey with you, and asking, well, what does this look like in your life? Help me understand maybe what my next step is. I encourage you to take some time to pray too. We've been leading you through some prayers in the service as a whole. Take some time to sing even the next song of what we believe about this God that I've been talking about. He is truly the God of the universe. And when we are in right relationship with him, we can receive a peace that is beyond understanding. I hope that's encouraging you today. Thanks for joining us. Look forward to seeing you next week.